Walter Grayson sat at the far end of the counter, his broad shoulders hunched over a steaming cup of black coffee. At 82, his frame still held the outline of a younger man's strength, though time had softened the edges. His hands, calloused and veined, wrapped around the mug, a faint tremor betraying the years. A faded tattoo of an anchor peeked from beneath the cuff of his flannel shirt, the ink blurred but unmistakable to anyone who knew the mark of a Navy man. His ball cap, embroidered with USS Hornet Vietnam 1968, sat low over his brow, shielding eyes that carried a quiet weight. Few in the diner noticed him. To them he was just Walt, the old man who came in every morning, ordered the same coffee and tipped $1 no matter the bill. The bell above the door jingled and a group of teenagers shuffled in, their laughter sharp and careless. They wore Letterman jackets, their voices loud with the confidence of youth, talking about the upcoming homecoming game. Walter's lips twitched, not quite a smile as he watched them pile into a booth. He remembered being that age, all bravado and dreams, before the Navy, before the war, before the long nights on the Hornet when the sea roared and the sky burned. He took a sip of coffee, the bitterness grounding him, and turned his gaze to the window, where the flag outside danced in the wind. The diner's door opened again, this time admitting a man in a pressed suit, his tie a bright slash of red against a starched white shirt. He carried a clipboard and moved with the brisk efficiency of someone used to giving orders. The chatter in the diner dimmed as heads turned. He was Michael Tanner, the new event coordinator for the county's Veterans Day ceremony, a man who'd moved to Jasper from Nashville and brought with him a city man's impatience. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on Walter, and strode over. "Mr. Grayson?" Tanner's voice was clipped, professional. "I'm with the Veterans Day Committee. We're finalizing the guest list for the ceremony at the courthouse tomorrow." Walter nodded, setting his mug down carefully. "That's right. Been going every year since '72. Tanner frowned at his clipboard, flipping a page. "Well, that's the thing. Your name's not on the list. We're prioritizing active duty personnel and recent veterans this year. Space is limited, you see. I'm sure you understand." The words landed like a stone in still water. Walter's face didn't change, but his fingers tightened briefly on the mug. "Limited," he repeated softly, his voice steady but low, like the hum of a distant engine. "Yes, sir," Tanner said, already glancing toward the door. "It's a smaller venue this year and we've got a lot of younger vets coming in. We'll make sure to get you an invite next year, though." He offered a tight smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes, and turned to leave. The diner was quiet now, the teenagers' laughter stilled, the clink of dishes paused. Walter stared at the counter, his jaw tight, the weight of the moment pressing against the years he'd carried in silence. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small folded piece of paper, yellowed and creased. It was a commendation letter from 1969, its edges worn from years of handling. He didn't open it, he didn't need to. The words were etched in his memory, a reminder of a night off the coast of Da Nang when he'd pulled 3 men from a burning deck, his own hands blistering as he dragged them to safety. The Navy Cross he'd received was tucked away in a drawer at home, too heavy to wear, too painful to display. "Hey, Walt," called Ellie, the diner's owner, from behind the counter. Her voice was warm, cutting through the tension. "You want a refill?" She held up the coffee pot, her graying curls bouncing as she leaned forward. Walter shook his head, offering her a faint smile. "I'm good, Ellie. Thanks." He slid a dollar bill across the counter, stood and walked out, the bell jingling softly behind him. The teenagers watched him go, one of them whispering, "Who was that guy?" No one answered. Outside, the morning had warmed slightly, the sun breaking through the clouds to cast long shadows across Main Street. Walter adjusted his cap and started down the sidewalk toward the courthouse, where preparations for the Veterans Day ceremony were already underway. Banners fluttered, and a small stage was being set up on the lawn, surrounded by folding chairs. A group of young National Guard soldiers milled about, their uniforms crisp, their voices carrying the easy camaraderie of those who hadn't yet seen war. Walter paused, watching them, his eyes distant. He didn't begrudge them their youth or their pride. He'd been like them once. He found a bench under an oak tree, its leaves a mix of green and gold, and sat down, the letter still in his hand. The courthouse lawn was alive with activity. Volunteers stringing bunting, a band tuning up, a woman arranging flowers near a temporary memorial wall. Walter's gaze lingered on the wall, where names of local veterans were etched in black. His wasn't there. He'd never asked for it to be. "Excuse me, sir," a voice broke through his thoughts. A young woman in a National Guard uniform stood before him, her posture straight, her eyes bright with purpose. She was maybe 20, her name tag reading Private Carter. "Are you here for the ceremony setup?" Walter shook his head. "Just watching," he said, his voice gravelly but kind. "Used to come every year." Her brow furrowed slightly. "Used to? You're not coming tomorrow?" He hesitated, the weight of Tanner's words still fresh. "Not this time," he said, looking away. "They're keeping it small." Private Carter tilted her head, studying him. Her eyes caught the tattoo on his wrist, the cap on his head. "You served, didn't you?" she asked, her tone softening. Walter nodded, a single, slow dip of his chin. "Navy. Long time ago." She didn't press, but something in her expression shifted, curiosity, maybe respect. "My grandpa was Navy," she said. "Korea. He doesn't talk about it much, but I know it shaped him. You remind me of him a little." Walter's lips curved, a real smile this time, though it was small. "Good man, your grandpa?" "The best," she said, her voice firm. "He's why I joined." She paused, glancing at the letter in his hand. "What's that?" He looked down at the paper, his thumb brushing over its creases. "Just something I keep," he said. "From 69. Doesn't mean much now." Private Carter didn't reply right away, but her gaze lingered on him, thoughtful. "I bet it means more than you think," she said finally. She gave him a nod, almost a salute, and turned back to her duties, her boots crunching on the gravel path. Walter watched her go, the letter heavy in his hand. He thought of that night in 69, the heat of the flames, the screams of the men, the way the sea had swallowed the stars. He'd never told anyone the full story, not even his late wife, Clara. She'd known enough to hold his hand during the nightmares, to kiss the scars on his palms and never ask for details. He missed her fiercely, her absence a quiet ache that never quite faded. The day passed slowly, the town humming with its usual rhythm. Walter walked home to his small house on the edge of Jasper, where the yard was neat but plain, the porch sagging under the weight of years. He sat in his armchair, the letter on the table beside him, and listened to the tick of the clock. Tomorrow the town would gather to honor its veterans, and for the first time in decades he wouldn't be there. The thought didn't anger him, it wasn't in his nature, but it left a hollow space, like a note missing from a familiar song. The next morning the Veterans Day ceremony dawned bright and cold, the courthouse lawn packed with people. Flags snapped in the wind, and the high school band played Sweet Caroline as families settled into their seats. Walter didn't go. He stayed home, his radio tuned to a local station broadcasting the event, the announcer's voice crackling through the static. He heard names called, speeches given, the crowd's applause rising and falling like waves. He sipped his coffee, the same bitter brew he'd had at the diner, and tried not to think about the letter in his pocket. But at the courthouse something was stirring. Private Carter stood near the memorial wall, her uniform crisp, her eyes scanning the crowd. She'd spent the previous evening talking to her grandpa, digging through old records, piecing together a hunch. She'd found a mention of Walter Grayson in a Navy archive, a brief note about a sailor who'd risked everything on a burning ship. She'd cross-referenced it with a local history book, confirming he was the same man who sat quietly at the diner every morning. And she'd made a decision. As the ceremony reached its midpoint, the band paused and the announcer called for a moment of silence. Private Carter stepped forward, unscripted, her voice steady but loud enough to carry. "Before we continue," she said, "I'd like to honor someone who isn't here today. A man who served in Vietnam, who saved lives under fire, who never asked for recognition. His name is Walter Grayson." The crowd murmured, heads turning. Tanner, standing near the stage, froze, his clipboard forgotten. Private Carter went on, her voice gaining strength. "He's not on the list today, but he should be. He earned the Navy Cross in 1969, pulling men from a burning deck on the USS Hornet. He's one of ours and we owe him our respect." She raised her hand in a crisp salute, facing the empty bench where Walter had sat the day before. One by one the other National Guard soldiers followed, their salutes sharp and unified. The crowd was silent, then a few stood, then more, until the entire lawn was on its feet. An older man in the front row, another veteran, pulled a faded photo from his wallet, a grainy shot of a young Walter on the Hornet, grinning beside a group of sailors. He held it up, his hands trembling, and the crowd's murmur grew into a wave of applause. Back at his house, Walter heard his name through the radio, the announcer's voice faltering as he relayed what was happening. Walter froze, his coffee mug halfway to his lips. He listened as Private Carter's words came through, each one landing like a pebble in the hollow space he'd carried. He set the mug down, his eyes on the letter, and for the first time in years, he felt the weight of his past shift, not lighter but shared. The ceremony ended, but the moment lingered. People in the crowd whispered Walter's name, some pulling out phones to search for his story, others vowing to stop by the diner to shake his hand. Private Carter slipped away from the stage, her mission incomplete. She had the photo now, borrowed from the older veteran, and a plan forming in her mind. She wasn't done with Walter Grayson. To be continued in Part 2. Subscribe to Hoffman Stories to follow Walter's journey and discover how a single act of recognition ripples through a town, rekindling a legacy of honor and compassion. Who else will step forward to ensure Walter's story is never forgotten? The afternoon sun hung low over Jasper, Tennessee, casting a golden glow across the quiet streets. The Veterans Day ceremony had ended hours ago, but the courthouse lawn still buzzed with a lingering energy, as if the town itself had taken a deep breath and held it. The memorial wall gleamed in the fading light, its black granite etched with names that seemed to hum with stories untold. Walter Grayson's name wasn't among them, but today, it was on everyone's lips. At his small house on the edge of town, Walter sat in his armchair, the radio now silent. The commendation letter from 1969 lay open on the table, its words stark against the yellowed paper. For extraordinary heroism, under intense enemy fire, saving the lives of 3 fellow sailors. He hadn't read it in years, but Private Carter's voice from the ceremony echoed in his mind, pulling the past into the present. His coffee was cold now, untouched since the broadcast had named him. He didn't know what to make of it, decades of carrying his service quietly, and now, a young soldier had turned a spotlight on him. It felt strange, like a coat that didn't quite fit. Outside, the crunch of gravel broke the silence. Walter glanced through the window to see a pickup truck pulling into his driveway, its red paint chipped but polished. Private Carter stepped out, still in her National Guard uniform, her boots gleaming. In her hand was the faded photograph she'd borrowed from the veteran at the ceremony, its edges curling from age. She carried something else too, a small wooden box, plain but sturdy, tucked under her arm. Walter stood, his knees protesting, and opened the door before she could knock. "Private Carter," he said, his voice steady but curious. "Didn't expect to see you here." She smiled, a mix of nerves and determination in her eyes. "I hope I'm not intruding, Mr. Grayson. I wanted to bring you something." She held up the photograph, the young Walter staring back, broad grin, navy whites, the USS Hornet's deck behind him. "This belongs to you. And there's more." Walter took the photo, his fingers brushing the worn surface. He remembered that day, a rare moment of calm between missions, when the crew had laughed and posed for pictures, unaware of the fire that would come months later. "Where'd you get this?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Mr. Hargrove, from the ceremony," she said. "He served with you. Kept this all these years. Said you were the bravest man he ever knew." Walter's throat tightened. He hadn't heard Hargrove's name in decades, hadn't known he was still in Jasper. "He's wrong about that," he muttered, but his eyes lingered on the photo, tracing the faces of men long gone. Private Carter stepped forward, setting the wooden box on the porch railing. "This is from the town," she said. "We took up a collection today after the ceremony. It's not much, but we wanted you to have something to hold on to." She opened the box, revealing a polished brass plaque engraved with his name, rank, and the words Navy Cross recipient, USS Hornet, 1969. Below it, a simple line, "For valor and sacrifice, Jasper honors you." Walter stared at the plaque, his hands still, the tremor gone for the moment. "You didn't have to do this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We did," Private Carter said firmly. "I looked you up, Mr. Grayson. Found your citation in the archives. 3 men are alive because of you. This town's been sitting on your story too long." She paused, her eyes meeting his. "I know you don't like the fuss, but you deserve this. We all needed to remember." He didn't respond right away, just looked at the plaque, then back at the photo. The weight of the moment pressed against him, not heavy but warm, like Clara's hand on his shoulder in the old days. "Thank you," he said finally, the words simple but carrying the depth of years. Private Carter nodded, then glanced down the street. "There's one more thing," she said, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "Mind if we take a walk?" Walter raised an eyebrow but followed her, slipping the photo into his pocket. They walked back toward the courthouse, the town quiet now except for the distant bark of a dog and the rustle of leaves skittering across the pavement. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp earth, the kind of scent that settled deep in the bones. As they approached the courthouse lawn, Walter slowed, noticing a small crowd gathered near the memorial wall. Faces turned toward him. Allie from the diner, Mr. Hargrove leaning on a cane, the teenagers from the morning before, even Michael Tanner, his clipboard nowhere in sight. Private Carter led him to the wall, where a new plaque had been mounted, still gleaming from its recent installation. It read, "In honor of Walter Grayson, Navy Cross recipient, for extraordinary courage and service to our nation and community." Below it, a small bench had been placed, its wood polished, a simple inscription carved into the back, "A place to remember." Walter stopped, his breath catching. The crowd parted and Mr. Hargrove stepped forward, his eyes wet but bright. "Walt," he said, his voice rough with age, "I should have said this years ago. You saved my life that night. Never forgot it." He extended a trembling hand and Walter took it, their grip firm, a silent bridge across decades. The teenagers shuffled forward, one of them, a boy with a letterman jacket, holding out a folded flag. "We, wanted you to have this," he said, his voice awkward but earnest. "From the team. For what you did." Walter took the flag, its weight familiar, its folds crisp. He didn't trust himself to speak, so he just nodded, his eyes tracing the stars against the blue. The crowd began to clap, not loud but steady, a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. Ellie wiped her eyes and Tanner stepped forward, his face flushed. "Mr. Grayson," he said, "I was wrong yesterday. I'm sorry. You're welcome at every ceremony always." Walter looked at him, then at the crowd, their faces a mix of young and old, familiar and strange. "I'm no hero," he said, his voice low but clear. "Just did what needed doing." He paused, his hand tightening on the flag. "But this means something. Thank you." The crowd dispersed slowly, some lingering to shake his hand, others to share stories of their own relatives who'd served. Private Carter stayed by his side, quiet but present, her mission complete. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the lawn in a soft orange glow, Walter sat on the new bench, the plaque above him catching the last of the light. He thought of Clara, of the men he'd saved, of the years he'd carried their weight alone. Now it felt lighter, shared with a town that had finally seen him. The next morning, the Star-Spangled Diner was fuller than usual. Walter walked in, his cap adjusted, the commendation letter tucked away for good. The teenagers waved him over, offering him a seat at their booth. Ellie brought his coffee, no charge, and a slice of pie she insisted he try. The bell jingled, and Mr. Hargrove hobbled in, taking the stool beside him. They talked, not about the war but about fishing, the weather, the way Jasper's oaks always turned gold before red. Across town, the bench by the memorial wall became a quiet gathering place. Veterans stopped by to sit, to reflect, to share stories with passers-by. The high school started a project to collect oral histories, the teenagers taking turns with a recorder, capturing tales of service and sacrifice. Private Carter, now a regular at the diner, began organizing a monthly veterans breakfast, ensuring no one like Walter was ever overlooked again. Walter didn't talk much about the ceremony or the plaque, but his step was a little lighter, his smile a little easier. The town had changed, not in big ways but in the small ones that mattered. A nod from a stranger, a door held open, a quiet thank you as he passed. He'd carried his past in silence for so long, but now Jasper carried it with him. Walter's story is a reminder that heroes walk among us, often unnoticed, their courage tucked into faded letters and quiet routines. Take a moment to see them, in your diner, your park, your community. A kind word, a listening ear, can honor a lifetime of sacrifice. Subscribe to Hoffman Stories for more tales of quiet heroism and the power of compassion to change lives.